Well, Russia hasn't been exactly our friend on the free press in recent years as well. Vladimir Putin has an extremely draconian policy towards press. Anna Politkovskaya, it's a very difficult name sometimes for me to say, for the Nova Gazeta was murdered last year, and that was something that Reporters Without Borders, a very high case that we have been very critical of. We have the case of journalists within the UK that have suffered poisoning. Whether or not there are direct links to the Russian government, we don't know, but they used to be former KGB and worked for the Russian government. Vladimir Putin has not made statements, even though we have sent several letters to the government. When members of Senate or congressional members tend to travel to the region, we try to provide them with information so that they can exchange with higher levels of government their concern that journalists are being murdered in the country and that these cases need to be investigated. Anna was somebody that was very well known for being a staunch critic of Vladimir Putin and his kind of very conservative and tough stance on press freedom in the country. And you have the case in Zimbabwe with Mugabe's government, and we know that Mugabe has exercised, very kind of economic meltdown within the country by kicking out farmers who have been based there from foreign countries for numbers of decades, and really just taking over without any kind of legality their property, kicking people out, kicking foreign correspondents out, not allowing any journalists to really work in the country that's not on the government line. And so you're really seeing that Zimbabwe is a huge crisis in terms of free press. Journalists are murdered. Free presses in those days when Mugabe first started his kind of campaign to get out all of the kind of quote-unquote white farmers that had taken over his land. Free press was, the print presses were set on fire. So his police have definitely really implemented a culture of fear as well in Zimbabwe. Other African countries, you're seeing a lot of internally displaced communities and refugees, and those countries that tend to have natural resources like Liberia, countries where you're seeing the quote-unquote blood diamonds in and out of the countries where reporters tend to go. There are a lot of different kinds of interrogations of journalists within those countries. Ethiopia and Eritrea are quite serious towards their policies on journalists. They don't like journalists to go against the government line. They don't like journalists to discuss the continuous border disputes that exist between Ethiopia and Eritrea, essentially Ethiopia being now landlocked and not having access to the kind of imports that the Eritrean government is benefiting from. So there are ties to free press and economic kind of sustainability, and that is really putting pressure on the government to threaten journalists, harass journalists, get them to not discuss things that the government feels are threatening their national security interests.